30 seconds ago.
It is now.
Okay. Hopefully people can hear me. So this is Lloyd Halferty. This is week 87 of our Indigenous Global Unity Summit, our IGU Summit event. I do like to start each of these weekly events with a land acknowledgement. It is a slightly different acknowledgement this week as we had been doing in previous weeks. But I do like to say we begin today by acknowledging that we walk upon the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples and we recognize their history, spirituality, culture, and stewardship of the land. We're grateful to all Indigenous groups for their commitment to protect the land and its resources. We're committed to reconciliation, partnership, and enhanced understanding. We acknowledge the land we are meeting on here in the Greater Toronto Area is the traditional territory of many nations on the land known as Kalenkeha, as Te Karanto, including the Mississaugas of Credit, the Wendat, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe or Anishinaabe peoples, and is now home to many diverse peoples. We'd also like to acknowledge the land we are on here is at the meeting place of two treaties, the lands of the Mississaugas of Credit and those of the First Nations, the Williams Treaty. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 and is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. We also acknowledge the Two-Row Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Six Nations of the Te Karanto watershed and the settlers, an agreement that bound them to work together but to develop their societies in parallel on these shared lands. In our role as settlers and displaced people on this land, we share the responsibility of challenging and disrupting colonial systems that enact violence upon the land and stand in solidarity with Indigenous peoples. We would also like to thank the Indigenous peoples of these lands, including First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, for sharing this land with us. We also acknowledge and recognize all of the world's Indigenous peoples as stewards of Mother Earth. I do also like to say Sawubona, which means I see you, I see myself in you, I see your hopes, your dreams, and your struggles. I see your ancestors as well, because interconnectedness does not end with two people who are greeting each other, it extends to include the ancestors. All beings in Mother Nature are interconnected. There is no sense of being separate. I see myself in all beings, and therefore if I harm other beings or Mother Nature, it translates into harming myself. Today is Thursday, February 2nd, 2023, week 87 of our IGU Summit series, and the fifth of the IGU Summit series events for 2023. Our guest speaker for today is Frederick W. Schuller from Fragile Inheritance, an organization in Ontario, here in Canada, that promotes and supports the long-term study of species and habitats, human and environmental effects on them, and the conservation of biodiversity. The presentation title for today, Mud's Their Home, and So Is Ours. I will put into the chat a link to the Fragile Inheritance website you can go look at. But before I go through all the events that are just happened or coming up, I like to show this Living Read calendar. As I talk about events coming up, I do want to show this calendar because it is something that I have been creating based on the events that we did last year. The Living Read calendar reflects our Drawdown Markham and UnityNet GTA plans for 2023 and revolves around the 4 key community engagement events in April, June, August, and October. The events include the first one, Undrip Day on Earth Day, Saturday, April 22nd, an event where we do drumming at city halls with Indigenous peoples. And it's also a day we engage with the students at local schools to start planning and building their own local youth peace gardens at their own local schools or in their communities with the community partners. The second event.
Upstairs next door or down in the living room?
I could ask people to mute themselves for now. So our second event is the Abraham Project Tree Planting Day, which takes place on World Environment Day, which is Monday, June 5th. This is the day where we plant the trees of peace and reconciliation and raise the Indigenous unity flags in celebration and ceremony at the youth peace gardens that the young people in the local communities established with their schools and the rest of the community members. It's on this day where we create the INAB collaboratives, our local empowerment networks for humanitarian entrepreneurs in our local communities, where the INAB collaboratives are the cooperative entities that form the backbone of our network of networks that we call UnityNet. The third event is the International Youth Day on Saturday, August 12th. This is the date for our Bubble Fun festivals. So keep this date open because it is where we come back to those youth peace gardens and celebrate our diversity as localized communities of equals in our own communities, coordinated globally. We celebrate together in a hybrid event that is local and global through virtual sharing, where each one of us human beings in our local communities is recognized, and those around the world who are localizing the global goals through the development of partnerships in our local communities, where each of us helps to ensure that our local humanitarian entrepreneurs are empowered by the members of our local INAB collaboratives. And the fourth event is Youth Peace Week in October, which starts on Global Cooperation Day, or Wednesday, October 4th. This is the date of our Ubuntu Summit, the event which launches Youth Peace Week, but also the Global Climate Smart Youth Forum, which is the primary hybrid learning week program that takes place until Monday, October 16th, which is World Food Day. So it's during Youth Peace Week, which is nearly a fortnight, where we'll do some edutainment programs with both in-person events here in the city of Markham and in York Region and from across Ontario and Canada, but especially from the Rouge and Don watersheds of the Great Lakes Basin here on Turtle Island, in partnership with the members of our own local communities, including the schools and the Indigenous people here in the Greater Toronto area. We'll work with schools like York University and Seneca College and the local schools and teachers from the Catholic and secular school boards, and seek to work with our UnityNet members through Drawdown Markham and our partnerships, especially as we create these local INAB collaboratives here in the GTA. We seek to create at least 5, but as many as 25 of these local empowerment networks established in 2023 and over the next few years, with at least 3 by the end of 2023 in Markham, Vaughan, and Richmond Hill. So the INAB Collaborative Cooperative Empowerment Networks for our young people and humanitarian entrepreneurs who are localizing the global goals here in Markham, in the Greater Toronto, Ontario, Canada area, in the Great Lakes Basin north of Lake Ontario, Turtle Island. So join us through Drawdown Markham and UnityNet GTA, UnityNet Ontario, and UnityNet Canada. And if you're living in another part of the country or in another country, or even on another continent like Africa, join our UnityNet CTP program so we can coordinate our activities and partner with your own local community through each of our own local INAB collaborative teams. One last thing that I wanted to mention is that on Tuesday, January 17th, as you would see in the calendar in orange, we had our first Drawdown Markham virtual event. At that event, we discussed establishing our PodNet GTA Enterprise Network, which will support the 25 INAB collaboratives that we intend to create here in the Greater Toronto area. As mentioned in weeks before, here in Markham and the Greater Toronto area, we'll be doing everything through the INAB collaboratives, including demonstrating regenerative gardens, forests, farms, and buildings, kitchens, and also regenerative finance. And of course, we will be empowering our humanitarian entrepreneurs who are localizing the global goals in each of our own local communities. So please join us wherever you are in the world. This is the essence of Global Unity Network, our network of networks, which consists of the local and localized multi-stakeholder partnerships, the interfaith neighborhood academic and business collaboratives, who are changing the paradigm of development globally, one community, one local watershed at a time. As I mentioned for the past few weeks as well, there are other things to consider because the FAO did come out with a newsletter a couple of weeks ago. It noted that 2023 is the International Year of Millets. So this is something to consider as well. Again, in the chat, I'll link to their own website of the Food and Agriculture Organization. COP15 was also mentioned, especially in that newsletter around adoption of the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Again, from the FAO website, you will see that information in the chat as well. I am putting some additional information that I believe is also important for our members to understand the global context of what we are doing in our own local communities. There has been, for instance, a recent meeting between the Secretary of the International Plant Protection Convention and there are a number of other news items that were just recently sent out in the FAO newsletter. So as we move forward with our legacy projects here in Markham, we have already begun having a local conversation with the 7th Generation Initiative. So they are, as they call it, empowering generations to connect dots and create a bigger 7th generation story, a story of change for the well-being of lives, communities, and the planet. So this is a conversation via a gentleman by the name of Brian Puppa from the 7th Generation GTB team, where GTB is the Greater Toronto Bioregion. And so we are moving forward, especially in conversations now with York University. So we hope soon also to have a conversation as well with the founders and leaders of the Maple Leaf Center for Action on Food Security. Again, you can find that information in the chat. So in January, just a few days ago, we wanted to celebrate one important date that people should know of. Yesterday started World Interfaith Harmony Week. That started Wednesday, February 1st, goes until Tuesday, February 7th. So World Interfaith Harmony Week is a UN resolution for a worldwide week of interfaith harmony, proposed in 2010 by King Abdullah II and Prince Ghazi bin Muhammad of Jordan. The World Interfaith Harmony Week falls in the first week of February of every year, aims to promote harmony between all peoples, regardless of their faith. Again, you will find the information about some February holidays and observances, as well as specifically World Interfaith Harmony Week. Today is also World Wetlands Day, Thursday, February 2nd, which is why we have a special presentation today focusing on wetlands from Frederick W. Schuller from Fragile Inheritance. So again, in the chat, you'll find information about World Wetlands Day. In that link I shared earlier, you'll also find today is also Groundhog Day, a National Hedgehog Day, National Tater Tot Day, and National Ukulele Day. Not really seriously important days, but something to consider as we celebrate our diversity. We are also still planning to have a discussion primarily with Sir Bailey from youthbuildcharter.org and Michael Rendler from our C4 group, our Climate Smart Community Construction Collaborative, where we hope to also talk with people like Lynn Crandall, Marcella Ovilia, and Isaac Sabakije about the Next Earth Fest, which is also in planning, and where we hope to also co-host this hybrid event with our UnityNet, GTA, and PodNet partners and all of the Wikipod collaborators, and where we hope that this event will also help spark the imagination of young people, teachers, and their parents and elders who are working with young people at the schools here in Markham and in York Region and the Greater Toronto area, who can be empowered to take action through the Global Sister Schools program, starting with the planting of the youth peace gardens, where we also hope to work in close collaboration with all the members of UnityNet Ontario and Canada, including the co-founder of the Indigenous Global Unity Network, Michael Scher, who would like us to begin having a conversation about practical reconciliation, starting with the development of a curriculum based and related to his Indigenous Unity flag. Specifically, we want to establish a legacy education project that we would like to do in solidarity with Indigenous peoples, possibly also with Scouts Canada and Europe, hopefully with more partners like Rotary International, as they seek to implement an Indigenous Unity badge for the young people who are participating in their programs, where we can partner with local schools, especially schools of the arts, the schools of architecture, in each of our own local communities across our network of networks, where we can host a series of virtual and in-person charrettes and help Michael and the Scouts come up with a curriculum, hopefully over the next few months, where the curriculum would help young people to understand that every country has their own Indigenous peoples, and that we must become compassionate members of a global society of humans as an essential part of a process of real reconciliation. And the key people we have for our projects are the members of the Unity Learning Network and the Global Sister Schools program, and others who may wish to contribute to this process and the efforts. So also coming up this month in February is the International Day of Human Fraternity on Saturday, February 4th. So in just a couple days, where we recognize the valuable contribution of people of all religions or beliefs to humanity, and the contribution that dialogue among all religious groups can make toward an improved awareness and understanding of the common values shared by all humankind. As well, Saturday, February 4th is also Transit Equity Day, a national day of action to commemorate Rosa Parks and other civil society and civil rights icons, and to advocate for accessible, reliable, and affordable transit powered by renewable energy. February 10th is also one day after next week's IGU Summit event. That is World Pulses Day, which is an opportunity to raise public awareness about pulses and the fundamental role they play in the transformation to more efficient, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable agri-food systems for better production, better nutrition, and a better environment, as well as a better life while we leave no one behind. So again, in the chat, you will find links to the International Day of Human Fraternity, which is again February 4th in a couple of days, along with additional information about these events that are coming up, such as the National Day for Human Fraternity, which is, I believe, on the 10th. So there is also our link to the document on human fraternity for world peace and living together, which is represented by our trees of peace and reconciliation. There is also information in the chat about World Transit Day, or Transit Equity Day as it's called, and then a link to an organization called AHIABGA Canada, which is promoting that event here in Canada. As well, there is the FAO and United Nations World Pulses Day, an important source of plant protein, of course. Before we start today, I'd also like to give everyone a little bit of our history, just so especially those who are new on the call can understand who we are and where we're coming from. So I wrote in many of our UnityNet group discussions recently, as I was saying, Happy New Year 2023. I wanted to say thank you to all who stayed with us in UnityNet for this past year, especially as we exhibited so many growing pains. And as we continue our journey together and seek ways to find not just ourselves, but our better selves. Or as one lady said during the recent HHEC Clubhouse discussion, in 2023, I will be seeking to be the best me. I would like again to mention where UnityNet started, because it did all begin with this Mother Earth, Watering the Fields of Humanity, Just Stop Music Showcase. This Spark program that we have been promoting since 2019. Again, you can find additional information in the chat. We also have a related local group, the Greater Unity Pandemic, was started back in 2020. As I noted in the chat groups recently as well, we want to let 2023 be the year where humanity is able to truly begin the process of breaking out of the shackles of colonialism, which is as much of a mindset as it is anything else. Although, of course, there is still the by-force element of it, which is still on display in places like Ukraine. I also mentioned recently the original Spark for Humanity initiative that started this discussion in 2019, before the COVID-19 pandemic, as a practical legacy that helps everyone to focus on the kinder world that we can create together. This began with a song called Mother Earth, which is, again, linked to the YouTube is in the chat, where I also noted that we can begin to establish a global network of peace communities, peace villages, and peace cities by starting to plant these local youth peace gardens. So again, UnityNet Youth Peace Gardens Network discussion and networks is in the chat, along with the UnityNet Smart Cities Network. I also included in a WhatsApp post earlier this year a few other videos for people to watch, including the ones that I'm sharing in the chat, like the one by Omar Essa called One Love, which was our theme song for that original global unity pandemic. And I think it is important for people to understand the context of where we're coming from. I'd also like to remind all our members in UnityNet and UNAD and in some of the other key networks and chats, this has always been about engagement of youth culture and hip hop. Because back in October 2019, on the 27th day, our host for today, who started this out, Andrew from Andrew Networks, even outlined for us the specifics of the 5 key strategy areas. First, being we will open new routes to engage and involve young people and to amplify their voices. Second, we'll strengthen our focus on their access to education and health services. Third, we'll place their economic empowerment to the forefront of our development strategies through a focus on training and jobs. Fourth, we'll work harder to ensure young people's rights are upheld and promote their civic and political engagement. And fifth, we'll prioritize support for young people in conflict and in humanitarian crises, including their participation in peace processes. So these are the priority areas that were outlined by Andrew during a discussion with the original team at the Greater Unity Pandemic, the team that created the Spark for Humanity initiative, which was supported by all the artists who were singing in that Mother Earth video by the Mother Earth Collective. So I do encourage everyone to watch the videos that I placed into the chat. They are great examples of what we call edutainment. And if we have time after this presentation, we may also place some of them for our audience today between the discussions. So again, there are some additional links in the chat. You can find, for instance, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, Human Rights, Committee on the Rights of the Child, and other links to human rights networks. But getting on with today's presentation, I would like to start with a simple introduction of who I am, who we are. So I am Lloyd Halferty, co-founder of UnityNet International, also known as Uni, a hybrid, holistic, practical learning management system and company based in Canada, also assists with community partnership building globally by leveraging this unique set of community engagement activities developed in partnership with the members of the Ad Hoc International Advisory Board of Goodwill Ambassadors. I'm also the Chief Ecosystem Director, Program Development Director, and a Sustainable Society Consultant for Energem University, headquartered in Manhattan. in New York, in the US, of course. I'm located in the city of Markham in the Don River watershed. German Mills Creek is the sub-watershed near me. That drains into Lake Ontario, the lowest and last of the North American Great Lakes in the Greater Toronto area. We are in Southern Ontario, Canada, here in North America, or Turtle Island. So AHIABGA University is a private 501(c)(3) nonprofit company in New York City, a member of the UN Global Compact, a UN academic impact member and partner. We're a virtual university. We were created to help empower global populations to reestablish a sustainable balance with their local environments. We do this by designing and implementing projects that support a strong and diversified local economy while integrating core sustainable technologies and infrastructure into those communities in the areas of renewable energy, high-density food growth solutions, and systems for sustainably managing local waste streams, protecting local water resources. We are supported by over 375 companies whose products and technologies we employ. Importantly, AHIABGA University also supports local education and training in the construction, deployment, and maintenance of all the various integrated solutions for achieving closed-loop systems that in turn support self-sufficient, sustainable communities. So today, as I did in the last couple of sessions, I would like to go into more details about what it is that AHIABGA University expects to happen as we begin to assist with projects in local communities anywhere in the world where people might wish to do them. I wanted to remind our audience that AHIABGA University is a charitable organization, a 501(c)(3) nonprofit. As such, we do not and legally cannot profit from our projects. Aside from covering the costs of operating and hiring the people we need to create the projects with our project partners. We're not looking to compensate anyone for land or an opportunity to help them create a community project that in the end they will own. We can help to provide the facility construction support and of course the education and training expertise, along with project development support that will allow your community members and your local entrepreneurs to create the solutions required, whether it's in Canada or in Africa or anywhere else in the world. We do not, however, intend to pay for that opportunity. We can also help our partners find money for your own local project if you're willing to put up the land, find some of the financing on your own end as well. As of this moment, we do know of no other organizations or efforts other than some international agencies that we're aware of that will come and gift such an effort to a school or a community or a country outright. We also know that UN financing goes through the governments, is top down, and tends to be corrupted in too many ways. But there needs to be buy-in and material participation on the part of the partner for any charitable organizations and philanthropic entities to contribute to completing the funding and implementing the local projects. This is particularly true if the project is designed for a school or other private organization. It is not direct funding to a government of your country. Our work also includes partnership with the UNDP. We are getting the participation of the countries directly. We are also able to look for matching funding in the US, where AHIABGA University is incorporated, especially from groups who are interested in supporting these projects. But if those entities don't see material buy-in from the partners and the partnering entity in places like Africa or the indigenous communities, they will have no interest in funding those efforts. So the mindset they have is that if the partner isn't willing to contribute to a local solution, they must not be committed to the project. So everyone we work with puts up the land. After all, they will own the local projects when they are completed. We do not and will not pay our partners for something our partners will ultimately own themselves. We're here to help and provide all the project direction, implementation expertise for the projects. We are committed to seeing them done all over the world. But we need partners who are at least equally committed to the success of these projects in their own local communities. The benefit of the AHIABGA University programs is that any community that builds them will have a local training center that will regularly graduate the next generation of high-tech farmers And we can also extend our efforts into retraining farmers throughout the community and throughout the country as well. But the key is community involvement, which may include a combination of local organizations, schools, and government agencies, which is one of the main reasons why UnityNet is building our empowerment networks globally. So again, in the chat, you will find my own contact information, as well as a link to the Energy University website, which defines a methodology for education and training that we are using. You'll also find a link to the Science for Peace Cotswold Climate Smart Food Consulting Group public network, which we are leveraging as well to engage everybody in conversations, because it happens that everybody in the world is an eater and we all eat food. So that is one commonality that we do have between all beings on this planet. There's also some additional information to the Peace Education NGO Science for Peace, which developed the original protocols for climate smart food system. One more thing I do want to mention, we Energize Global Cooperation Turtle Island. I am the co-founder and administrator of this group. We Energize Global Cooperation Turtle Island, international civil society organization. We are seeking to undertake what we call life value peace education in the context of these life learning gardens. So we continue to promote this important concept of life value peace education. Again, in the chat, you'll find those links as you see them on the screen. There's also an organization that we do work with, the 5 Points Youth Foundation Ad Hoc International Advisory Board of Goodwill Ambassadors, where I was designated as a Goodwill Ambassador for that organization in Los Angeles, with a portfolio that covers Canada, La Francophonie, the Commonwealth of Nations, and Turtle Island communities. As a member of the Ad Hoc International Advisory Board of Goodwill Ambassadors and Activists, we are seeking to empower our communities to engage with royal, indigenous, and tribal leadership, as well as helping local communities establish those interfaith neighborhood academic and business collaboratives, the INAB collaboratives that come together and support, pledge to support all the local humanitarian entrepreneurs who are globalizing the global goals, starting, of course, with those Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, where while we are also seeking ways to leave no one behind. Again, connect with the gives links in the chat. I do want to mention as well our sponsor today, to give recognition, especially to Andrew Networks, which we call our door opening network of the Global Unity Network of Networks, or UnityNet, who is hosting each of these weekly Thursday Zoom calls, which we are committed to take place through at least December 29th of 2023. Andrew Networks also hosting additional events like those Youth Peace Week events and the Drawdown Markham monthly events as well. So Andrew Networks promotional support services also rebroadcasts any production-ready presentations or other citizen media with the themes around localization, re-indigenization, resilience, and the local implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, or the global goals, on the AHIABGA domain, which gets redirected to a number of social media sites, such as UCIT-TV site and others, where Andrew Networks is a brand and domain name owned by ParXDC Export Trading Company, comprising the various social media channels, including TRN TV, Universal Citizens Media Networks, Conversations with Andrew Williams Jr., and many others. Andrew Networks is not only our primary sponsor supporting the promotional ecosystem for the UnityNet initiative, the Indigenous Global Unity Summit. These was, of course, continue to December of this year. Andrew, we also call our Yes, Yes, Yes partner, helping to open doors so that members of our network are able to discover their inner selves and passions, where Andrew Networks is working with the people who occupy these various nodes of our global unity network, so they can come together with the people of the network, acting like a net to support the dreams of our members, so that they can leverage those passions transform their visions of a better future for themselves and their communities into a reality that makes sense for both themselves and their communities, however they might define what that better future is collectively as they seek to work together in partnership and leave no one behind in their own local communities. So again, you'll find information and links to get in contact with Andrew if you would ever like to have a conversation with him. As well, I do want to mention our global Unity network that we are creating, also known as UnityNet, with our main purpose as a business to help others succeed through partnerships as per SDG 17 in collectively achieving sustainable and regenerative communities, implementing all 17 SDGs, as well as taking local climate action, which is SDG 13, to achieve drawdown, especially through the production of regenerative climate smart food in all of our local communities, not just here in Ontario in the Greater Toronto area, but also across Canada and worldwide, globally, where we can begin solving the climate crisis one meal at a time, one family and one local community at a time as well, where the Global Unity Network is being created globally to support local community interventions through our UnityNet and AHIABGA community engagement processes that ultimately result in local community enterprises run by local humanitarian entrepreneurs, where both the enterprise and the teams that are running these enterprises, the local businesses, are investment ready and are able to successfully execute and create local businesses in a way that will generate sustainable revenues and hopefully profits for the business and for the local community members as well, through systems of regenerative financing that's done in the local and regional and national and international levels through the local community partnership cooperative entities, the local networks that are also part of and are members of UnityNet, where the local networks, these INEP collaboratives, also serve as the local empowerment teams for the local entrepreneurs, so they can achieve business success in their own local communities and or regionally and nationally, and potentially even internationally as they grow their business, selling the various regenerative goods and services that they produce that also benefit their community, benefit humanity, and benefit all our relations, Mother Nature, by helping to achieve the global goals regeneratively through the activities of their community-based cooperative businesses, their localized enterprises. So our philosophy is that only we ourselves can help ourselves, because our job in life is not to sit back and watch the show. Our job is to conceive the story, write the script, produce it, direct it, and star in it. So we need to be the best we can, inspire others, shine their brightest. It is our responsibility to be knowledgeable and confident in what we do, because it is what we create, what we produce and sell that matters. I like to say, as professional development coach Tom Harris said recently, the best and fastest way to learn something is to teach it. Do not wait until you know all about it or have mastered what you wish to share before you begin to share it. The world needs more of what you wish to learn more about. So don't worry so much about what you don't know, worry about what you don't do. You are depriving people of your knowledge and wisdom while you are waiting to become an expert. One more thing I do want to mention, the Youth Peace Gardens Network. The message of UnityNet involves a change in the paradigm of dialogue. We must always remember that we're fighting with peace and not for it, which means using higher consciousness in achieving our objectives. We're not fighting a war with each other to save the planet. We're making peace with the planet to save ourselves. And this is the new strategy that's being called the Gaia's Guitar strategy, which will allow us to create a shared consciousness with peacemaking that is more contagious than fear and war. So the message will be centered around 4 elements and symbols of peace that we wish to incorporate into every local community of UnityNet. And these include the Youth Peace Gardens, established with a tree of peace and reconciliation planted in the garden, along with an Indigenous unity flag raised in a location nearby, a peace pole erected in a conspicuous location with high foot traffic within and or next to the garden, where these are symbols of the UnityNet Peace Garden Network, which also includes the community Unity Garden learning centers that will allow us to create sacred spaces in all of our local communities, which can be mapped onto our UnityNet sacred site and watershed map, and are symbolic of the community of humanity coming together in peace, reconciliation, and forgiveness, and the restoration of our relationship with Mother Earth and each other, because this is the only way that we'll be able to ensure that all of humanity and all our relations will be able to survive in the climate of the future. So again, you will find a link in the chat to what you see on the screen. And just as the last slide before we get to our presenter today, I do want to mention UnityNet International. I am the co-founder of this global Unity network, which is being established by UnityNet International, which helped to create UnityNet Africa and Diaspora, and all of the other global groups in Asia and the Americas and Europe. We are a network of people and organizations supporting the AHIABGA and UnityNet process of globalization of the global goals, currently the Sustainable Development Goals, and the third global transition to a globalized, productive, compassionate, collaborative, regenerative economy that leaves no one behind. So we're creating a global empowerment network of professionals in regenerative development to support all of our members, including the female and feminist humanitarian entrepreneurs who are helping to implement the various local regenerative climate smart solutions that are required to achieve that productive, compassionate, collaborative, regenerative economy that leaves no one behind, where humanitarian entrepreneurship is simply defined as a social enterprise that focuses on the delivery of the solutions for achieving a sustainable development goals, or the global goals, locally, where UnityNet has a mandate to educate our youth so that they know how to build this regenerative climate smart infrastructure in all of their own local communities. So our role at UnityNet is to establish the hybrid infrastructure that is necessary for delivering the learning programs, the education and training that provides all of the local humanitarian entrepreneurs with the appropriate knowledge, tools, and processes that they need to help implement these global goals, currently, of course, the SDGs, to do so locally within their own communities, with the overarching goal of leaving no one behind. So it's important to note that the existing social media, the WhatsApp, the Facebook, the LinkedIn groups that we're using right now are being used as placeholders as we build this global Unity network and prepare to launch, where we'll eventually get all of the people, companies, and nodes of the network onto something called the Interchange for Peace VCN, where they will then be able to gain access to many more tools and services available there, where we can much more easily collaborate in order to locally implement all of these globally coordinated real-world projects and events and enterprises and infrastructure, with one of the key goals for 2023 being to begin getting our members, starting with the key stakeholders and members of the UnityNet support networks, especially our administrators, onto this Interchange for Peace VCN, which will likely first be hosted on the Easy Expo platform as a key element of our network of networks, the virtual metaverse trading spaces for virtual and global and regional trade shows. So our final UnityNet Interchange for Peace will also be including hopefully a virtual student union spaces that help empower young people and learners at all ages. This will be delivered by Energy University, a community investment and exchange system platform for the establishment of local neighborhood empowerment networks, especially of local multi-home communities and cities around the world. This, again, we have a partner in Montreal, the UnityNet Dreamboards virtual space linked to the digital dream boards in the community, as well as a regenerative financing platform for infrastructure projects and humanitarian cooperative enterprise financing for the members of the UnityNet to join and so they get on this Interchange for Peace VCN. So UnityNet International does plan to eventually bring all of these components together on our Interchange for Peace VCN. But this together, Energy University, the Sustainable Development Association, or the Association du Développement Durable, Again, in Montreal, we've got E7 Architecture Studio in Los Angeles, and Carbon Shot Earth as well. So again, you can see a link to the UnityNet social media. So I think at this point, what I will do is stop my own presentation, and we will on and have our guest speaker come on today to give us a little bit of his own presentation. So Fred, I'm seeing you're just coming online. Thank you. And we can pass it along to you if you'd like to also share your screen with your own presentation. Please feel free to do so.
Right. So here we go. I always have trouble sharing screens. Okay. Full screen.
You have
Okay.
our attention.
Ask them if they can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I was invited to do this just about a day and a half ago, and so this slideshow isn't particularly complete. But this is about World Wetlands Day, and it's working through a poem that I wrote some years ago about wetlands in Eastern Ontario, and so we had a woman in Kemptville who wrote columns, and she and for those of us who do biology in the spring and go after frogs and salamanders and and drifted material along the banks of streams and stuff, it just seemed inappropriate to disparage mud season. And I've just now worked out that it's the period in the spring between when the snow melts and when there's the onset of significant transpiration by vegetation that dries the land out. And so it's the period when you have mud on the surface. And I'm talking about the limestone plains of Eastern Ontario, which is an area that was scraped down to artificial glaciers, and then flooded by the Champlain Sea, because the weight of the glaciers had pushed the ground down below sea level, even below the low sea level of the partly receded glaciers, and so salt water came up the St. Lawrence, and this red area that Wikipedia calls Eastern Ontario was pretty much all flooded by seawater, and then the land rebounded, and one of the things that we have to remember is that as the land rebounded, there were people here already. So we don't have any sort of pre-human occupancy situations or plant communities or anything here. That people have been around and have been managing what's going on for as long as there's been anything after the recession of the Champlain Sea. And we live in Bishop's Mills, which is on the stream that's called Middle Creek, or the North Branch of the Kemptville Creek, or the middle branch of the Rideau River, depending on whose names you use. And you can see from this topographic map that an awful lot of our surrounding area is wetland. and when we about a quarter of the whole land area of the Kempo Creek Drainage Basin is wetland, and so we have a lot of it around. We did a chapter for the Conservation Authority years and years ago where we wanted to introduce people to the wetlands, and that's when we realized that the roads all go around the wetlands and you don't see them because they're either old indigenous portage routes or else the concession roads just weren't built in through the wetlands because the wetlands were so big, and there's very patchy areas where agriculture is possible, and other areas that are swamp forest or wetland. And to sort of set the context here, there's 4 kinds of wetlands in North. They're classified as 4 kinds of wetlands in North America. There's marshes, which are open water with grassy vegetation, or often cattails. Then there's swamps, which have open water with woody vegetation, which can be either brush, shrubs, or trees. And then there's fens and bogs, which are full of mosses, generally sphagnum moss. But a fen has nutrient-bearing water that flows through it. So water comes into the fen and flows through it and then comes out. Whereas in a bog, the bog is sort of a mound, and the only water it has is what falls as precipitation onto the bog, and it sort of oozes out in various directions at the perimeter. And so all the nutrients in a bog have come from direct precipitation. And this is what's called ombotrophy, or feeding from the clouds. And it's a model that I've used to suggest that all landscapes, we should strive for net ombotrophy and retention of the precipitation rather than letting them leak out through the streams. So here's the start of the poem, and it's going to be sort of broken up as reading a poem. And this exercise has sort of shown just how much explaining it takes to elucidate a scientific poem. And I've said in other places that, you know, when Milton was writing his stuff, he could assume that everybody knew the scriptures and classical mythology, and that they'd read Galileo's latest press release on the moons of Jupiter. But when you're writing about scientific stuff, there's so many details that it's very hard to assume that your readers are going to be able to have the same background that you have when you wrote it. And so this first couple of stanzas is about net ombotrophy and the sequestering of nutrients as spring, as the vegetation gets active in the spring. Water is flow and upland is soil. Life is where they lie commingled beneath the great green wetland hedges. And spring is when, in one vast heave, they marry the countryside and bear life for summer. It was spring when the muddy lips of the earth opened to swallow snow's residual dirt and grime and poop and pee into tomorrow and grind them into the promise of green. Lawns are licked clean by rebirth, and burgeoning begets a ligotrophy as 100,000 wedges probe the entangled bank. And so this is what I said about net ombotrophy and the sequestering of nutrients by vegetative communities and the animals that live with them. This is one of the findings of plant ecology, is that a mature, intact plant community retains nutrients from precipitation. And so the water that flows out into the groundwater or springs or seepage through the litter and stuff of a plant community has less nutrients in it than the rain and snow that fell. Mud-born grace this view of grandeur. Life extends its liquid lure as the smacking hopes of spring engulf your narrow cares and bring the running sap, the piping peeper, painting doodle waves of leapers. And I didn't get illustrations for this stanza. But the first sign of spring in Eastern Ontario is sugaring, where you tap the maple trees, and this sap has been going up and down the trees all through the fall and winter, but it's tapped in the spring, and we do this in imitation of the red squirrels, which also bite the trunks of the trees and then lick up the sap where the sun is concentrated as it runs down the branches. And peepers, of course, are the little frogs that call in the spring. And painting is timber doodles or woodcock, which have a little dance. The males have this dance that they do where they go peen, hip, peen, hoop, peen, hoop, peen, and then they fly up into the sky and circle around, twinkling with their wings. And this both establishes their territory with other males and presumably impresses the females as well. And waves of leapers are the leopard frogs, which are my thesis species, which occupy the whole, more than other species of frogs, they occupy the whole landscape because they winter in water that has enough oxygen to support them through the winter, and then move to wetlands in the spring to breed, and then disperse across the countryside for their summering to feed. Green on green, recycled dung, and in a song that's not yet sung, creekers crying from each corner, streams that flow through droughty summers, mitigation for Dow's swamp, turtles without male sex bias, big seeded herbs under the maples, eels and salmon in the Rideau. And this is hopeful stuff. Creekers are chorus frogs, and our chorus frogs in Eastern Ontario used to be ubiquitous, but with increased intensity of agriculture and urbanization and secondary succession growing up into forests, the populations that used to be all over in every sort of wetland or pond are restricted to the really best places. And streams that flow through droughty summers, the stories are told that the flow of the streams was before Loyalist settlement. The flow of the streams was much steadier than it is now, and we have really substantial streams that just don't flow at all in the summer. Mitigation for Dow's swamp, that's a swamp that was sort of taken up by a lake in the Rideau Canal. And turtle male sex bias, most populations of turtles that live near roads, because the females get out of the water to breed and often find good places to lay their eggs along roads, there's a lot of female mortality and really significant excess of males in a lot of populations. And big seeded under the maples is the idea that an awful lot of our forests are second growth, and that the trees have seeds that are either carried around by birds or blown by the wind, or else planted by conservation authorities or county forests. And we don't have the trilliums and the Dutchman's breeches and all the various forest floor herbs that grow in mature forests, because they just haven't been able to spread as fast as the maples and ashes and elms have. And eels and salmon in the Rideau, that's eels and salmon were species that ran up from the from the Atlantic into the Ottawa drainage. And it's probably, the eels run upstream as juveniles and then go downstream in the Sargasso Sea, whereas the salmon lived in the Atlantic and ran up the rivers to breed in the little streams. And to think they were in the Rideau is optimistic. There's a few old records of eels from the Rideau since the canal was built, but the Rideau was named for the vertical falls into the Ottawa River in Ottawa, and there's no way that salmon could have gotten up it before the canal was built to make navigation possible around Ottawa. Although some eels did get up in the past, but eels are now almost extinct in the Ottawa drainage because they can't get past the hydro dams, either going upstream as juveniles or going downstream to go to the oceans to breed. And mud's for sure the stuff to love for those who feel the season's shove. Before the fury of the ditching, this mixed wood plain was ruled by mud. Before the roads chopped us to bits and dams prevented migrant fish, before we sold our life as potash and hurled the pines down from the ridges, sharp heights divide the hard-cut lands. Here, watersheds through trackless wetlands, Hanlon's Marsh, the Long Swamp Fen, Mare Blue, and the Groveton Bog, where ooze still reigns and no one enters after winter's hold is melted. And there's a whole lot of these wetlands that nobody goes into except either on snowshoes or snowmobiles in the winter. And huge amounts of fragmentation that settlement has caused. This top painting is below the, and this is an old mill dam on Kempville Creek that divides the creek into an upland, an upstream end that becomes anoxic in a lot of winters and really restricts the animals that can live there, and means that none of the fish are able to migrate upstream beyond Oxford Mills. And one of the things we do is road ecology, which is really about animals being killed when they try to cross roads. And this is a wood frog in a county forest near one of the places where we study wood frogs. And we sold our life as potash and hurled the pines down from the ridges. Well, all across North America, there was a combination of trees lost to lumbering and use of the wood, and just clearing land to make agriculture possible. And various different strategies were used. But one of the sad things is that on the sand and shallow soil over limestone of eastern Ontario, one of the things that was done was cut the trees down, burn them, and convert them to potash, and sell the potash to England to be used as agricultural fertilizer. And so the nutrients that have been accumulated over the 7 or 8 millennia since deglaciation were just lost to the farms, and there's big areas where agriculture was abandoned just because there wasn't enough nutrients in the soil. And one of the things we have are what we call boundary wetlands, where the water, you have a big wetland and it drains out into 2 different drainage basins. And this is a place where we study this in Limerick Forest. And this was painted from a road allowance where there's a culvert under the road. And when the beavers plug the culvert, all that you see here drains south into the South Nation drainage, but the township has come along and cleared the culvert from the Beavers Dam, then it flows north into the Rideau drainage. And so you've got hundreds of acres here that switch back and forth which drainage basin they're in, because of the action of the beavers versus the township. And do they harbor mystic cranes? Such thunder pumps as still remain. Beaver and muskrat, flag and phragmite, bladderworts and hybrid cattails, orchid fens with hidden spotties, foretails in their sphagnum grottos, limnea with spiral livers, pout and puppies in the rivers, sticklebacks in bony armor, micropike in peaty tartans, rails that walk as if water, lily pads with mink frogs dotted, utterbacchia, lizard's tail, and legumia nazuta. And this is just sort of a blast of all the species that we've interacted with and are in love with in various ways. So one of the things that's happened in the past century is with the Migratory Bird Control Act and just a general cessation of the tendency to shoot anything that's large enough to be shot. Sandhill cranes used to be here, but they were just sort of wiped out in Ontario. And I first saw them up in James Bay in 1972. And since then they've gradually spread south through Ontario. And just in 2021, we saw them for the first time around here, although they were in the middle of various wetlands. And some birders knew where to find them in some of the wetlands, but now they're pretty widespread. And this is a photograph of the first two that we actually saw on the ground in our area. And such thunder pumps as still remain. And these thunder pumps are the American bittern, which is a marsh dwelling heron that's called a thunder pump because it has this kuchunk, kuchunk, kuchunk calling. And you very rarely see them. This one is a road-killed one that wandered out onto the road in Limerick Forest, and we picked it up and later painted it. And we hear them a lot less frequently here than we did in the past, although they're not considered a species at risk. But there's changes in the landscape that may have made a wetland that's near us unsuitable for them, and we don't hear them from that direction anymore. And then there's beavers and muskrats, and beavers are very influential in creating wetlands by damming up streams, and they're much smaller than the giant beavers of the Pleistocene, who apparently didn't. I mean, you think giant beavers, you think they'd cut down, 4-foot diameter trees and build enormous dams, but apparently the giant beavers didn't have this technology of cutting branches and carrying mud around and piling it up wherever they heard the sound of running water, or maybe even building lodges. So beavers, they take control of places that they occupy, and they build their little houses and build dams, which can be 3 or 4 meters high in some narrow places.
Why do they build that?
Why do they build dams? Well, they build dams to create wetlands because they can swim around, and they're harder for wolves to eat when they're swimming around.
And they store their
And they store their food in the the water that they flooded for the winter. And then muskrats are sort of another approach to sort of a rodent of just about the same shape, but and they make little piled homes, but a very different approach to things, that they just eat anything. And one of the things we do is freshwater mussels, which you'll see a bit in a while. And they go down, they dive down, they pull the mussels up and leave them until they open, and then pull them open with their paws and eat them. And so our strategy for finding and documenting populations of mussels is to think like a muskrat. And so these are a couple of paintings where beaver and muskrat were present. Phragmites is a really interesting genus of wetland plants, and it's called Phragmites australis. It used to be called Phragmites communis. It's the most widespread species of plant in the world. It's found, you know, as they say, found on every continent except Antarctica. And but the kinds that are found in different places are very different. And this painting is of the European, invasive European kind, which is also known as 401 grass for those who drive on Highway 401 in Ontario. It's just since the 1970s has taken over huge areas of disturbed ground in Ontario and Quebec. And one of the things we found is there's a native kind that's much less aggressive, and it doesn't form such dense stands. And in all of these big wetlands that this poem is sort of about, we found them in the centers of those wetlands. And then flag is another word for iris. And we have two species of iris. There's the native Iris versicolor, and then there's Iris pseudococcus, which is yellow colored, and it's considered an invasive species. Although I've never seen it more abundantly than just scattered plants. So I haven't ever really seen it take over a habitat in a big way. And bladderwort and hybrid cattails. Bladderwort is a carnivorous plant that has these little traps on it. It lives underwater, and small animals swim into the traps and get caught by various kinds of prickles and cilia and stuff. And so it's a carnivorous plant that uses animal protein to get its nitrogen. And in the summer, there's these gorgeous little golden yellow flowers that hook up above the surface of the water, and that's how you can see it without actually dip netting it up. And hybrid cattails, we have two species of cattails that hybridize very extensively, and they have a hybrid. The hybrid offspring is larger than either parent and lives in deeper waters. And so a lot of the big marshes along the Great Lakes are all these hybrid cattails, Typha glauca. And in the past 30 years now or so, it's been shown that the narrow-leafed cattail is a hybrid. I mean, it's not a hybrid. It's a invasive species from Europe that wasn't present in North America until settlement, and has gradually spread west across the continent until it's now the dominant cattail in big areas of southern Manitoba and Saskatchewan, and it's breaking into British Columbia. Orchid fens with hidden spotties. spotted turtle is a pretty common species in most of the eastern United States. And one of the big herpetological discoveries of the sort of latter part of the 20th century in Eastern Ontario was finding that we had populations, populations of these cute little turtles living in the centers of these great big wetlands that nobody had known about until 1975. And they have a very extreme tolerance of lack of oxygen in hibernation, and they just push themselves into hummocks of peat and sort of spend the whole winter without breathing, and then they come out in the spring and they sort of start themselves up again, and they're just as passive as bricks for the first day or so after they come out, because they're converting all this lactic acid that they created by anaerobic metabolism back into sugar. And Dave Sebern, who's done a lot of studying of them, he had one spring day when these really rare turtles, he caught more of them than he could hold at one time, because they just come out and they were laying around like bricks on the surface of the bog. And then Fortos and their sphagnum grottos. This is a salamander that it's a lungless terrestrial salamander, and the females go down to the edges of bogs and lay eggs in a nest like this, and the larvae hatch out and drop into the water and spend a few weeks as larvae and then crawl out on land. But you have to be there in the right few weeks of the spring at the edge of the wetland and the forest to find them. And we suspect the number of places we suspect they occur, but we just haven't gotten there in the right seasons to look for them. And Limnia with spiral livers. I was just Googling around to make these slides, and it turns out that what's up in most of the spire of the top of a snail is the gonads rather than the digestive gland. And so this is one of the problems with writing scientific poetry, is you find you make a lot of mistakes or something, they find something else out that you hadn't realized. But when I wrote this, I thought that it was the digestive gland that was all the way up into the spire of the shell. And eh?
The slugs,
The slugs don't have shells.
but the slugs at the tail end of the slug
Yeah.
is the digestive.
The tail end of the slug is the digestive gland. And pout and puppies in the rivers. And again, this isn't wetland, but it's water that drains out of wetlands. And one of the things that we do is we call mud puppy night in Oxford Mills, where we have these mud puppies that are a giant aquatic salamander that are most active in the winter. And they're one genus of, the mud puppies are one species of a genus of a family that's only found in Eastern North America. And then there's another genus that's found as a cave salamander in the Balkans. And they used to be all around the Northern Hemisphere. But now they're restricted to Eastern North America and this blind cave population in the Balkans. But our mud puppies are most active in the winter, and they gain condition through the winter by eating a lot of species that are less active in the winter. And they're very hard to find in a lot of places where they live. And we're now starting to get environmental DNA to find the populations that we haven't known about before. And then pout, our mud pout, which is the local vernacular name, for what's generally called the brown bullhead. And these run up streams. The place in Oxford Mills where had the painting below the dam, that's where we find the mud puppies in the winter. And in the spring, the mud pout run up the stream there, and there's a fishery for them below the dam. And sticklebacks and bony armor. Sticklebacks are an incredible little genus of fish that have stickles on their backs. And in our species is the brook stickleback, which swims across fields in the spring. I mean, they have this, they disperse into wetlands that have dried up, previously dried up, or ponds that have previously dried up. And the males make little nests where they entice the females to lay their eggs in their little nests, and then they look after the eggs until they hatch. And we've got a gorgeous painting of this that Lita did, but we didn't get it into the presentation in time. And this is the mud minnows are a family that's closely related to the pikes, and they're very tolerant to low oxygen. They're very upstream in all these streams we have around here that don't have any oxygen in the water in the winter, because the streams come out of the wetlands. And rails are very secretive wetland birds. Another species that you mostly know about because you hear the calls, and this is just a photograph of a Virginia rail and a record of calling that we heard in the course of some auditory monitoring. And they go kidik, kidik, kidik. And that's, except unless you're extremely lucky or a very dedicated bird watcher, that's really all that you ever know about them. And mink frogs, one of the stories about mink frogs is that when Sherm Blakeney in the 50s was sort of doing the first extensive survey of reptiles and amphibians in Nova Scotia, he never found any mink frogs because he didn't recognize the call. And when he'd go down to a place, they were always first to jump into the water. And so he'd find the green frogs, but he wouldn't find the mink frogs. And the mink frogs are relatives of the green frogs, but they're more aquatic, very exclusively aquatic in the summer. And they characteristically are seen and found on lily pads. And here's Utterbachia imbecilis, which has a name which expresses how insanely thin the shell is. This is what's called a floater mussel that used to only be known in Ontario or in Canada from the Lake Erie and the direct drainage of Lake Erie, and we now find it scattered small populations through Eastern Ontario and just recently into Quebec. And when the guy who found it in Quebec wrote to me about this, I looked at a collection we'd made up on the St. Lawrence near Quebec City, and there was another Utterbachia shell there. So it's sort of an inexplicable huge range extension. The story is told that in the States, its range extensions are due to stocked fish, but we haven't ever heard an account of anybody stocking fish from Lake Erie into the St. Lawrence or Quebec City. And lizard's tail, this is a swamp, wetland plant that is just as incredible as this photograph makes it look like, which we know mostly from the Castor River above Russell. It's a tributary of the South Nation River. And the Gumyanazuda, this is a species that before the zebra mussels came there was a population estimate done that there were 8 billion of these in Lake Erie. And when the zebra mussels came, and the zebra mussels are little European, well, there are North American ones in brackish water, but it's a freshwater mussel like the blue mussel of commerce that attaches itself to hard substrates with little threads, and it just chokes out the native mussels, and it just wiped them out. So that when we started to find them in new populations in Eastern Ontario, there was only one population left in one particular swirl of water in Lake St. Clair. And this is me finding them in Fishing Lake, north of Kingston, which finding them there helped the Nature Conservancy, inspired the Nature Conservancy to buy a significant chunk of the shoreline of the lake to help protect them. And so Lloyd has suggested that we have to start working for preserving and protecting the wetlands and trying to get them back. And Alita and my idea, one of our ideas is that we should be raising, because 85% of the wetlands in Southern Ontario were drained after settlement. And there's whole institutions of drainage ditches and maintaining the drains. And we had a friend who bought some land because she was a naturalist, and she bought land because it was swampy, and her neighbors decided that they wanted it to be drained. And as a landowner in the land that was to be drained, she was compelled to help pay for the ditch that destroyed what she'd bought the land for. And so we've really got to get back as many of the wetlands as possible. And we have this trope that we say, well, let's put in 50,000 dams across the outlets of wetlands in Northern Ontario and raise the sill 1 centimeter of each of them, 1 centimeter each year, to build up organic soil and sequester carbon to fight climate change. It's probably not as simple as that, because freshwater wetlands also produce methane. So there'd have to be a lot of study to figure out how, what kind of plant communities to encourage and how this should be done. But yeah, we're very lucky in Eastern Ontario to have so much of our wetlands intact in our particular part of the province. And I think that's it. So if people want to ask questions, yeah, I know how to do it.
So thank you very much, Fred, for that excellent presentation today. I think it was a really different type of presentation than what we usually have. Typically, we do have somebody from a developing country that will make a presentation about what they're doing locally in their own communities. And so This is what we're trying to encourage, to really pay attention to their own lands, their own biodiversity, their own waters and watersheds. I'm sorry for the camera. Perhaps what I should do is just stop my video because it doesn't seem to like working. It is something I will need to fix. But the idea that we have essentially is what we want to do is work locally with various partners in our local watershed. So we are in, of course, north of Toronto, in the Great Lakes. All of us, I think, yourself, Fred, and myself, and many others, I think, on this call, like Mike and Leslie, and a few others. Michael, I see on the call as well. And so work in partnership, create partnerships that will allow us to demonstrate solutions for livability, for creating livelihoods that will provide us with that opportunity to have the time to really reconnect our young people with our landscapes, and together to work toward that that future that we need to achieve, where we are protecting our watersheds and our whole environments. And I'm seeing, Mitch, that you have your hand up and would like to say a few words. Please go ahead.
No, I wanted to ask Fred a question. That was a fantastic presentation, actually. I don't know that other people might have been as appreciative of it as I am, having grown up in Ontario, and all the different things he talked about. I sort of remember, and I'm going to go away with the notion of to try and think like a beaver, or think like I think you said muskrat, but I think a beaver might be a better way to think. My one question, I was concerned about the mussels that attacked Ontario, and I was wondering, did we win the battle or did we lose the battle?
Well, that's a really interesting question. When the freshwater mussel recovery team was active, there was a rule that we weren't to consider what they called the Great Lakes and connecting waters, which was, you know, the Sault Ste. Marie and Lake St. Clair and the St. Lawrence. That we just consider them as a black hole in which we couldn't even think about native mussels being conserved because the zebra mussels had taken them out so completely. And recently, Dave Zanata at Central Michigan and some of us here in Eastern Ontario are finding native mussels that are colonizing areas in the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence. And so there's a recovery being made, and there may be unexplained declines in zebra mussels. You know, one of the first things that happened when zebra mussels took over the Great Lakes was that there were a whole bunch of diving ducks that just stayed in the Great Lakes and didn't go down to Delaware Bay for the winter because they had all these zebra mussels to eat in Lake Ontario. So a lot of invasive species are worse at first, and gradually the native species recover to some extent or another.
So we lost the battle.
One of the things we have in Eastern Ontario is we have the Ottawa River, which comes off the Shield in Quebec and doesn't have enough calcium in its water to support the zebra mussels. And so the native mussel, the whole native mussel fauna of the Ottawa River, except for the species that depend on shad or trout for their host species, their host fish species, is still intact. And so that's a case of of a success
Thank
there.
Yeah, so we are obviously as well in discussions. So this week, really important here in Ontario, we have a visitor here by the name of Joe Brewer, who is doing work on ecoregions and connecting. His vision is to connect ecoregions around the world. And so what this gentleman is doing here in the city of Markham. Here in Markham, we are meeting with him as well. I met him on Monday at the Cornell Community Center. I will be meeting with him again on Friday, as well as today. There is an event down at OCAD University. And so Joe Brewer is coming to visit our eco region here in the Greater Toronto area. And he's engaging with young people and elderly people. Brian Papa is the name of this gentleman we're hoping to partner with to establish what we call a Unity Garden Learning Center as part of his developments, where he's working with the City of Markham. He's working with the TRCA. He's working hopefully with Parks Canada and other stakeholders in the eco-region, including all of those watersheds that drain into Lake Ontario, everything basically south of Lake Simcoe, including the Oak Ridges Moraine and all of everything, perhaps even stretching out to parts of Eastern Ontario. But basically defining the ecoregion and involving all the young people, all families, all the elderly, multiple generations, multiple different people from across the region in these programs of bringing young people into nature, getting them to understand where they are, their ecology, their watersheds, their local natural systems, so we can redefine and reestablish a new system of education. So working with York University locally, as well as Seneca College and all of the school boards. So we want to redefine a new curriculum, a new education system that can then be adopted in particular by UNESCO, where we can bring that education system across and around the world through this local network that we are establishing. I mean, it will be a long road to get there, but we are working locally here as a starting point. But we will establish the partnerships to work locally and set the example here that others can emulate around the world in any other community, whether it's in South Africa. I'm looking at Heinrich, who is here, or Susan, I believe, who's in Kenya, across Africa, across Asia. We're developing the core network right now. As I mentioned earlier, we want to establish all of these, what we call interfaith, neighborhood, academic, and business collaboratives, which have 8 different sectors of each local community coming together as a cooperative to support the entrepreneurs, bring them all into this virtual collaborative network, which we're hoping to work with even corporations like IBM or others in our community, where we can now bring everybody together to have these kind of local conversations about how do we restore nature at the continental scales, but one watershed at a time. And that is one of the biggest challenges, I think, right now in the world, is to restore nature. Climate change is an enormous issue, of course, but I personally don't think we're going to stop climate change. It may even be very, very, very difficult to get to net zero. But we need to at least protect our watersheds, restore nature, ensure that we're able to feed ourselves, ensure that we're able to have livelihoods, even in this most degraded places on Earth. I mean, and so we're hoping to set the examples, build that infrastructure. We start with the 5 regenerative climate smart infrastructure solutions as examples: the gardens, the forests, the farms, the regenerative farms, circular economy solutions, the kitchens as learning spaces, and other types of infrastructure. For instance, these what we call these pod buildings, as an example of regenerative infrastructure that we'd like to showcase within the context of the watersheds, where we bring the young people, we bring the families, we bring the older people all together, and bring all the schools together, start learning from each other, start sharing this information around the world as well with other people, so they can say, yes, this is going to be a future economy that we want as well. So trying to inspire a whole generation of young people, especially to begin this grand task of restoring Mother Earth. So I don't know, Mitch, if you wanted to say a few more words. Your hand is still up, or you just forgot to lower it.
I did forget, but I do have something to say. I'm hearing you talk, and I'm wondering how Mexico can benefit or can participate, because I know there's a Mexico group associated with you, and we were building a train here in Mexico, and it's going over the most incredible cenote system in the world. We have 3,000 cenotes, and the train is going to possibly, I don't know what technology they're using to protect the cenotes, because our whole terrain across Yucatan is only like 30 feet deep. You know, it's not like in Ontario where we have the Canadian Shield. Here we have a very thin layer of protection of the water that's right underneath us, and we have a huge reservoir of beautiful water, but it's going to be put at risk. For the train began as a $6 billion commitment. I learned 2 nights ago that it's up to 20 billion. And the courts have tried to shut it down in a number of areas, but the president, AMLO, AMLO is committed to going ahead, and even though he is getting stopped all along the way, he's proceeding, like he's going ahead, and the indigenous people be damned. I'm on the commission that's looking at this, a human rights commission here in Mexico, and I'm told, I haven't seen it yet, but I'm told that UNDRUP is written into their laws, and that's a good thing if it is. But if it is, it's being ignored by the president of the country in going ahead with this train. The rationale for building the train is if it ruins the environment and the nature here, why will people come down here?
Exactly.
You know,
I visited those areas as well. I've been to where you are, Mitch, in Playa. I've been there. I've been to the Yucatan, and I've seen those cenotes, and I've been to those places. And it is the reason we're going down there for our vacations and all of this tourism. It's because of nature.
Yeah, well, I'm here, and I'm struggling with what to do. I met 2 nights ago with a commission that's it's indicating that they're intending to do everything we're talking about, but there's no
political commitment.
They're talking. I asked them the question. I said, what do you know about graphene, for example? And I don't know if you know much about graphene, but I know that there's a lot about graphene we need to know to see how it does affect the natural environment. We don't know. What we do know is that graphene is going to be in our cement. It's going to be in all of our, it's going to replace plastics. We have a big problem at the nano level with plastic in our water. I don't know if we've come to know all this yet of how much.
It is
plastic.
definitely a topic that is actually being discussed very widely, especially among many of the people in our network in Africa. They are now aware of the problems that are being caused.
Well, they're aware of the problem, but we're suffering with it. We don't talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's the
You know,
oceans, it's the soils, it's everywhere, right?
yeah,
And graphene, of course,
exactly.
you're right. I mean, that's another ingredient. That's the what they're going to use to make the light cars and the light vehicles, and that's the
Well,
lightweighting material.
Yes, yes, and strengthening too. With
Mhm.
paints, paints will last double the lifetime of existing paints. You know, depending on the mix you put in. They're researching how much, like what percentage of graphene you need to put in to get what length of benefit. You know, there's probably a cost benefit of how much longer it's going to last with what percentage of increment, you know, and then it's got to be put into a global evaluation system, because everybody is going to want new cement. Everybody's going to want new steel. Everybody is going to want stuff prepared using graphene, only
Mhm.
because it's the lightest, strongest material that's ever been invented.
Yeah, well, that's I actually studied Buckminster Fuller and Buckminster Fullerenes when I was
Yeah,
in
well,
high school.
he would have loved graphene.
Yeah, well,
He would-
and this is the material of the future for sure. And but will it cause hormone disruptions in
We
mammals
don't-
and
we-
in nature? We don't know that either.
We don't, exactly. But I think it's a safe bet. We're better using it than not using it. We just have to
But-
use it intelligently.
Oh,
Yeah.
and hopefully, I mean, just as we discovered that biochar works to help soils, hopefully there will be benefits as well, ultimately.
well,
But we just have to make sure that we don't have those toxics.
Well,
as part of these.
Fred pointed out to us why we don't have healthy soil is that we sold all the potash to England. We didn't keep enough in our system. I did understand you, right, Fred?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And we continue to do so
yeah.
from Saskatchewan and all these deposits.
Well, we have to rethink all the stuff that we're doing.
And this is another very, very important reason why we want to create these eco-village center of excellence, hopefully here in the Greater Toronto area, maybe another second one as an eco-village out in Eastern Ontario. And this is what Stephanie Schuller's working on, developing
we
the
can do
UnityNet
one.
eco-village network.
We can do one here in Mexico too. We
Mhm.
have the communities that want to be involved. They just
Again,
need to know.
But the idea is that we need to teach young people how to recycle nutrients within the context of their own watersheds. So recycling our poop, recycling our waste, and turning it into back into value added. So
Right.
this is actually what gentlemen we're working with at Energym University is doing in Vietnam, Paul Olivier. So he developed this Wheel of Life farm, which basically recycles all the nutrients from the animals, all the nutrients from people, everything back into productive food producing systems. This is our climate smart farm demonstration that we want to eventually implement. And we have to have everybody in every community doing this eventually.
Yeah,
and if we don't,
sure
we're
Mike-
really screwing ourselves.
I'm sure Mike Nickerson has a lot to say about this.
Yeah, we're doing that too.
We compost. There's a
Yeah.
bunch of people in Eastern Ontario I know that do full
Compost.
cycle nutrient management.
Mhm. We need to teach young people how to be doing it, and it has to be done at a scale that matters everywhere. not necessarily industrial scale, but in every local community. They've got to be able to figure this out, how to recycle our waste properly, and really make regenerative closed loop systems. We can't be shipping these nutrients all over the world from the main deposits that we know of. It's already getting dispersed. I mean, there's this whole idea of peak phosphorus that I learned so many years ago. I was involved with Dr. Brad Bass at the University of Toronto. He was actually modeling how long it would take before we actually run out, and what will we do after that once we hit peak phosphorus. And we're really again up the creek with that. If we everybody's heard, a lot of people probably heard of peak oil, but peak phosphorus is much more daunting as a problem, especially if we continue with the current agricultural systems.
The big problem with human manure composting is that, when babies are curious about their poop, they're saying caca bad. And a lot of people carry that formative impression way into adult life when they, may hear that it can be very safely managed and so on, but they still don't want to go anywhere near it.
Well, this is the biggest challenge, and that's actually part of the reason why Global Unity Network and what the work we're doing is one of the most complicated things that I've ever done in my life, certainly, is because what we're trying to do is change the culture, change the learning. And that is the biggest challenge we have, is actually to, and start at a young enough age so that people will have that change in paradigm and change in thinking. And to do this work is probably one of the biggest challenges that humanity has. We're hoping that our partners around the world, we have people on this call like Susan and Heinrich on this call, Doris, who are in Africa, who are part of our global network, who are listening to this and saying, oh my, well, this is something we can do, hopefully, with partners around the world, where each of us does a little bit of work on these solutions. Many of the solutions are out there, but we need to get to scale. We need to create these systems in every local community. And so this is the biggest challenge. It's why we're trying to bring everybody onto what we call this Interchange for Peace, the virtual collaborative network. Actually, it's a metaverse space, just like Meta, Facebook trying to do that. But in this case, it is for exchanging information, open data, open learning. But we need to create spaces where young people will also have fun. And that's also why we're working with people who are members of UNESCO, like Lisa Anise, who's in California, to bring the fun aspects of learning, we call it edutainment, into this, so that the young people and the teachers and the schools and the families will all get involved in the Bubble Fun festivals and in these programs we want to do in our communities that will really involve the families and get them talking about this and understanding these solutions, and that they need to be done, or we're backing ourselves into the proverbial, painting ourselves in the proverbial corner. I don't see a big future for humanity if we don't at least try to do this. Long term, 7 generations, if we're thinking that, that's 175 years. If you think a generation is 25 years. So we're talking about the year 2300. None of us will be alive at that point, but we've got to lay the groundwork. And that's what essentially we're doing.
If you've got young people who are interested in hanging around and doing stuff, we have accommodations and work for a few people.
Exactly. So this is also this concept that's being now promoted by York University and other universities across Canada. They call it WIL, and that's basically learning while you work. So you go out into the field, and as part of your training, your learning, you're not in a classroom anymore. You're not in a traditional classroom. You're out in nature. You're in those factories. You're working with the experts. So this is not a new idea, right? But what we want to really do is get your accreditation through actual doing.
Even the accounting profession promoted that. I grew up, I got my degree by going to Queens, but having a job with an accredited agency.
Exactly. So all fields need to do this. All learning, I think, needs to switch to this. And so I'm hoping that we'll be able to partner with York University, and they're gonna start implementing some of these classes that they're running through the Markham campus, which is a brand new campus here in Markham. And they're going to start building these starting with the Youth Peace Garden. We're going to start there. We're going to twin that Youth Peace Garden, all the Youth Peace Gardens we plant in Markham, with other communities around the world. We're going to get people onto this VCN. We're going to start building those Unity Garden Learning Centers as nature spaces that you can start learning about nature and interacting with nature in these gardens, in these controlled environment. Even they're like greenhouses, so they can be. Of course, our school year starts in September and ends in May, so that's the coldest season. So how do we get young people into nature, even at this time of year? Like, this is February 2nd. You're probably not gonna have a class outside, but if we have a controlled environment growing greenhouse that acts as a classroom, perhaps we can continue to have our kids in nature without that liability, because it's going to be the lawyers that are going to prevent young people to go out to nature in the freezing cold. I know my wife is an early childhood educator, and I remember dropping off her kids dropping off her at work every morning. And yesterday, her kids are usually outside, but yesterday they weren't, because it was below 15 degrees. Minus 15 was the forecast, so the kids weren't allowed outside. So that's something we're going to have to deal with, right? So that's why we want these controlled environments as well at every school
in Mexico.
In every community, and they don't have that problem in Africa as well, or many places of South Asia. I mean, it's only really Canada. But the interesting thing about these buildings is that they also act as cooling centers when it's too hot outside. So they can still be used as classrooms even in the hottest weather, as especially many places in the world are getting too hot to be outside in the hottest weather.
Well, we have what we call Mud Puppy Night in Oxford Mills, where those mud puppies were painted from, and we have a forecast of minus 30 for this Friday's event, and we have kids come out to them. So
well, if you dress right, obviously you can. It's not impossible, but it's just, like I said, it's the lawyers, and they need to be part of the conversation too, right? The lawyers and the as Mitch said, the people with the bean counters and everybody, right? They all need to be. That's why we need not just the kids, but the families to be out there with those kids, with those elders, with those Indigenous peoples.
Our grandson goes to a school where they go out in the woods several times a week, and they have snowshoes for each of the students.
Yep. So we're absolutely, we need to reconnect people back to nature, and this is our biggest challenge, is understanding that we are part of nature. We are part of our watersheds. We are here as just another species on this planet. We don't rule it. We are beholden to its function and its health. And without that help of nature, we are nothing, and we will not survive, because we are the only sentient, we are the only known sentient species in the universe. We are life as the consciousness of the universe. As far as we know, there is none. There could be other life, and I've been seeing the stories of space exploration recently, especially with the launch of this new satellite, the one in out near I forget the name of the synchronous place that it's holding, out near beyond the moon, out near Mars or something like that. But it's amazing that they say, yeah, life could exist, but it's most likely not beyond bacteria. It's a miracle that Earth has life as it does. This
Well,
multicellular life.
we do have ravens, and they're always making comments about what we're doing, so I wouldn't make them out of the question.
Yeah, well, we originally called this the Beaver Project. It was a conversation I was having with Mike Nickerson and this gentleman in Montreal. I forget his name right now, but we were saying, look, what we want to do, the original Beaver Project concept was, we were talking about this new Parks Canada was creating this new urban national park called Rouge National Park here in the Greater Toronto area, and part of that park was taking parts of the lands of the city of Markham. We said, can we actually showcase to bring Indigenous peoples and bring people into the park, to live in the park in harmony with nature, and showcase that, to show that people can actually live in a national park. Like if you look at what the recently happened in December with this new treaty that happened in Montreal. Not new, I mean, they just sort of resurrected a treaty to so-called protect 30% of nature. Well, what are they going to do? Are they going to kick off all of the Indigenous people off all the lands in order to quote unquote protect it? No, we have to show that people and nature can live together in harmony. So can we do that here locally in the Greater Toronto area, in an urban national park? Bring people into the park to live regenerative lives, regenerative lifestyles, show that it's possible. This is our eco-village center of excellence that we would like to build here, where we're showing that it's possible to live regeneratively and protect nature, restore watersheds, while still having livelihood. And livelihood isn't just about making money. Livelihood is being able to feed yourself. Livelihood is being able to do things that help your family to survive. Doing fun things, hopefully, as Mike says, right? Less stuff, more fun. So the dancing, the celebrations, we call it the celebrating our diversity, celebrating our differences. Actually, Heinrich was a big part of the conversations when we were having those original conversations as well about livelihood and ensuring that we are celebrating that diversity. Go ahead, Heinrich, if you want to say a few things.
Hello, everybody from South Africa. It is evening here already. We had some good rain in the area that I'm living in, and most of the country, actually. Yeah, you know, while we are very happy to discuss, you know, the local responsibilities that we've got with the watersheds and so forth, are we still part of the global village that is destroying 24 soccer fields per hour of Amazon forest? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
But that's not that's small fry. Our biggest problem is what's happening in our oceans. You know, they say that while we are destroying 24 soccer fields per hour of rainforest, we are destroying 4,000 soccer fields of ocean every hour in the world. And you know, we can do whatever we want to do with our local climate and nature areas and things that we've created to protect our environment. But if other people are still pursuing, you know, troll fishing and those type of things, we've got a steep gradient to go up in the world to prevent that. We in South Africa is a good example of, you know, leaving things till it deteriorate beyond repair, and then everybody starts scrambling and want to protect it. You know, our electricity utility is a good example of that. We had some years ago the second best electrical utility in the world, but today we are sitting with load shedding because our maintenance didn't keep up with the requirement. We've worked our thermal power stations till redundancy. Now suddenly a country like us can't have economical growth due to the fact that the electricity is down most of the time. And you know, so many things are linked to electricity. The way that we treat our sewage, you need electricity. The way that we provide potable water to the cities, you need electricity. You can have full dams, but without electricity, you can't pump. You know, and this is one of the things that we need to build in our way of thinking, is also identify the next hurdle, that, and instead of trying to get over the hurdle, is to do things that there is no hurdle. We need to be much more proactive together to prevent and stop some of these things that is actually going to create chaos on Earth. And you know, governments don't want to hear these cries for help and for assistance, because you know, they are building the next railway line that is you know, economical, sustainable in their minds. But the whole picture needs to be considered. You know, when we manufacture stuff, many times the minimum order is 100 or 200,000 of a plastic component, because you can get that component then at a very reduced price. But then somebody else come with a new invention, and half of that stuff that was sitting in the warehouse is redundant. You know, so we've wasted all the energy and everything manufacturing all these units, and everything is being wasted. We need to curtail the way that we are producing stuff. We need to prevent certain catastrophes that we know is going to happen, but you know, politicians all over the earth, all over the world is not giving the necessary attention to these problems, and these problems are snowballing eventually to such an extent that it's, you know, you can't prevent it. As you've said with global warming, we are probably past the point of return, and we can just try our best to make it as comfortable as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, we are facing a lot of problems, and I think part of the problem is that we are so much looking up to sort of the top rather than looking back down to our local communities. And so the idea of governments, quote unquote, at the national level, or even at the provincial level here in Canada, doing something for us, rather than us doing something for ourselves and at the local level. So this is the idea, that we are trying to work to create the partnerships at the local level, that so we can take action wherever we are, as setting that as a model for taking action locally moving forward, and hopefully inspiring others to do the same, setting up structures that allow them to do the same as we're trying to do. but as well partnering even with the governments, the national governments, the provincial governments, but in particular as well with those corporations that have said we want to implement those global goals, those SDGs, those UN Global Compact members. So their boards of directors hopefully will be occupied by the same young people that we're teaching, that are learning these systems in nature, and eventually their cultures will hopefully change. They've got to change their charters.
I would like to finish by saying that, yes, we need to have a global perspective, but each of us need to act locally.
Yes.
We can't do it the other way around. And,
Mhm.
and that's a balance that we need to create in our thinking, is to understand what's happening globally and how our actions locally is going to make a difference. Thank you.
Mhm.
And Hendrik,
Mitch?
I'd like Hendrik to address the notion of electricity, because, you know, we don't address it anymore. It seems that the current process of developing electricity is going to be either wind or solar or nuclear, and not through oil. And I'd wonder how much of Africa's oil electricity, pardon me, how much is hydroelectric power or solar power? What percentage of it?
Well, at the moment, about 65% of all electricity used in Africa is generated in South Africa and used in South Africa. Most of the other African countries is just not using the amount of electricity that we are using. There is places identified in the Congo River where we can probably, at that one spot, generate enough electricity for most of Africa's current needs.
So
The Caribbean,
that should be a project for us then. If we are looking at delivering enough electricity to Africa, so that I can say to an African, this is what we should do, and his response always is, we don't have any electricity. So how can we eliminate that response? How much is it going to cost to set up that system?
we in South Africa are rolling out these public-private partnerships rapidly now. I was quite absent in the past few weeks because I was touring the country, especially the Eastern Cape. We are putting up windmills on every knoll, mountain, you name it, and there's one of these windmills, and one of those windmills have a capacity of 6.2 megawatts. And the sea ones, the ones that the Americans and the Britons are putting in the sea, are going up as high as 10 megawatts per unit. So we are definitely moving to more sustainable and natural type of energy in South Africa. But we must understand, if you are a manufacturing country with a huge base load, melting steel and all those type of things, you need utilities that can produce that base load. And therefore we're using coal in South Africa. We were spearheading the pebble bed nuclear reactors in South Africa, but that was shut down for political reasons mostly, because we want to do a nuclear deal with Russia. So, you know, there's a lot of money on the table for everybody if you do a deal like that. Now, some of the local people in South Africa are actually planning to roll out this micro nuclear generators all over the country to supply the baseload that we require to supply the industry with electricity. The one big problem at the moment is the Kariba Dam is empty, so they can't generate electricity for Zambia and Zimbabwe. Water is another big thing in Africa, there's big rivers, the Zambezi, the Congo, the Nile, and somehow we will have to build systems that can bring water over these watersheds to other parts of Africa. You probably look, if you look at the fertility rate in Africa, you know, it is very soon, by the year 2050, every fourth person on earth will be coming from Africa. The biggest export product that we've got in Africa at the moment is young people. So we need to educate these people, make them engineers, scientists, and whatever, so that they can take over the responsibility in the Western world, because there's no young people. Even China have brought out incentives now for the people to have children. They've scrapped all the rules of, you know, so many children per household and things, because suddenly they've discovered that there are a lot of old people. There's no young people coming. And, you know, that's an interesting thing with everything that we are doing on this globe. Once you start fiddling with the natural thing of natural things, something else goes pear-shaped. And a lot of things is going pear-shaped. You know, many days you look at all the problems that we've got in Africa, and you realize it's still a better place than many other places on the globe. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, so I think that whole paradigm, though, of growth at all costs is another paradigm we need to shift in people's minds. And I think that's where a lot of these countries are looking at the aging population and saying, oh no, we need more young people because we need quote unquote that growth in populations, and we need that growth. But it's actually not true. And this is the part of the reason why we're also talking about regenerative finance and regenerative systems of being able to produce and distribute wealth more equitably, because the current system, again, the top-down system, is really broken.
Lloyd, in Canada, pardon me the way I'm interacting, by the way, I don't mean to be rude. It's just my nature. In Canada, we have an initiative called the 21st Century Initiative, whereby, no, it's just called the Century Initiative. Where
Century Initiative, you told me about it.
Yeah, well, they don't answer their phone calls, because I've been trying to talk with the person who's running this organization, and it comes out of a large, someone who's important somewhere, think tank. I think he's head of Rio Tinto. He came up with the idea for this thing, and then he went off to Rio Tinto, and the person running it, I have to say she's incompetent, because she can't. I've been writing her every third day, asking her, what are you guys doing? What's your plan? And they refuse to respond. And this is crazy. You know, if Rio Tinto is backing an organization to build Canada at 100 million people by the end of the century, we should know about it, and the market should know about it, and it should be a point of discussion in Canada. Do we want to be 100 million people? I don't know. Is it going to be good? I don't know.
It's the growth mentality. We need. It's this idea that we need to grow at all costs. That's embedded in this philosophy of economic growth. Where they can't wrap their mind around any other paradigm, and
that's the way all of our economics has been driven for the last 50 years. You know,
and obviously it was good at the beginning, and there were fantastic benefits from that paradigm. But we're at the point where we can't have that paradigm any longer as our driving mandate for the economy we have. We're destroying the planet. We're beyond the boundaries.
Worse, you know, we're destroying people. There's
Mhm.
like,
We're destroying cultures. We're destroying entire people that our motivation. Look at the younger generations here that are aware of the problems. They don't want to have kids anymore. There's a problem with the with
well,
having that, and why they're saying, oh well, we need immigration. That's why Canada's saying, oh well, we need 500,000 people, immigrants, into Canada every year, because we don't have enough young people being born.
well, the question is, do we, or do we look, you know, do we make the reserves where we placed all the Indigenous people, do we make them all livable?
Exactly. This is what we're hoping to do with, again, the UnityNet, the Eco-Village Center of Excellence, because we want to create a network of eco-villages that start demonstrating this and show that there's better livelihoods available, even in these rural communities in Canada, or in Africa or wherever, and show that it's possible that we can have smaller population and still better lifestyles.
Well, we have a problem with the Indigenous peoples because they are their own worst enemies.
Well, their minds are colonized. That's actually, I've had that conversation with Michael Schur. He says, actually, Michael, to say the truth, Michael, who designed the Indigenous Unity flag, he says, Canada, you're not allowed to use my flag. So the only places we can actually fly an Indigenous Unity flag is anywhere but Canada.
That's very
Because he
funny.
says, I don't want to work with the Indigenous people of Canada. They've been colonized already. Their minds are lost. But I said, I'm still having a conversation with him. I think we can have those flags flying in Canada as symbols of the retaking of land by the Indigenous communities.
UNDRIP will be the reference paper for that.
Yeah, well, we're gonna get the city of Markham to recognize UNDRIP, just as you requested, Mitch. We're gonna work with Dr. Jose Echeverry and people at York University and those folks that are part of the 7th Generation Initiative. And we're gonna start getting our municipal leaders to recognize UNDRIP all across the GTA, across Ontario. There's 444 municipalities here, and a few thousand, I think around 3,000 across Ontario. So we have got a lot of points of entry into talking to municipal councils.
Well, everybody will say, "Oh, I've heard of that," and then next, what's the next thing?
No, we're gonna create those local cooperatives with the partners, with the Rotary Club, with all of the Boys and Girls Clubs, with the Scouts and everything.
It has to be,
as part of
it
this.
has to be put into the law.
Yeah.
If it's not in the law,
well, that's because everybody looks at top down. We got to do it from the grassroots. Start at the municipal councils. We'll get York Region.
If you get just Markham, it'll be a blessing.
Yeah,
you know.
well, we got to start somewhere, and we'll start locally. This is the idea.
Well, we've got Contaneroo is using it, and,
right. And we will partner with you there, and we'll partner with Heinrich in South Africa, and we'll partner with Susan in Kenya, and we'll partner with Doris and everybody on the calls that we have every week. So we can say, look, here's what we're doing here. We have our calendar of events. We do something on, we do our UNDRIP Day on Earth Day. As a starting point, we start getting those young people to build those youth peace gardens. Then we bring them together to celebrate, to plant the trees of peace, to raise the Indigenous Unity flags, hopefully. I don't know if it's going to happen in Canada, but we'll at least do some in South Africa and Mexico and other places.
Get someone to write a song about it.
And we'll put in those peace bowls. Yeah, we need the artists. Absolutely, we need the artists and the creative people, and especially the young people who are going to be the ones that are going to move forward, because this is for them. It's not for us. Look at the age in this of the people in this call.
No, it is for us. It is for us.
Yeah, well,
Because we want to feel good about what we do. We want to
Mhm.
feel good about what we do and that we're not wasting our time. Because it's a critical mass, a critical problem. The oceans, it's been a problem for when I first got involved
decades.
since 1980. We wrote about in 1980 about the problem of the oceans, and we
Well,
wrote,
I agree with what you said to me very early on, Mitch. Is that we need those schools of finance, those schools of teaching how economics, the schools of economics, right, to change the way they teach the young people, and we need the charters of the businesses to change, and we need a lot of things
Well,
to change in the culture of business, and
Well,
that's the most difficult part of this.
well, we have examples of people that are in business. This Blankenfield guy who took FTX into bankruptcy. That
Yeah.
all happened when everybody was watching. Everybody was watching really closely, and all it took was a downturn in the Bitcoin market, and it wiped out the trading companies. And they haven't even talked
Mhm.
about that yet, of why he failed. They're saying it's because he was a crook. Yes, he was a crook, but he was only a crook because he didn't know how to deal with a downturn in the market. He only
Mhm.
knew on the upswing. And
Exactly.
schools of economics don't teach about downturns. They only teach about upturns. How do you create sustainable inflation? It's like a joke. How do you create sustainable inflation using interest rates as your tool?
The
You
only
know,
tool.
as your
The
only
only tool they
No,
have.
no. Well, they forgot one thing, and it's called money supply.
Yeah,
I think we have to look at how we create money that doesn't disturb the broken system sufficiently that our new system, that everybody's happy.
Yeah.
And I'm writing a little proposal on that right now. So
Actually, the other thing I really loved what you said many years ago to me, and it stuck with me, Mitch, was this, that if we want to heal the planet, we got to make healing the planet and restoring ecosystems profitable.
yeah, I said humankind will make peace when peace makes money.
Yeah.
That's what I said.
But very, very similar, right? If you want to do this stuff,
well,
you gotta make it profitable, because that's what everybody's looking at right now. But we do need to change that mentality, that paradigm.
Well, there's another step in that process, is that we have to move off single line economics. We got to move beyond triple bottom line accounting. We started with triple bottom line accounting in 1990, and it wasn't sufficient. So we have to move beyond triple bottom line accounting, while the world isn't fully using triple bottom line even yet.
Mhm.
So we have to move beyond that triple bottom line to incorporate health and energy. It's really all we're talking about is how do we shift the energy around more effectively, and it's not with the Bretton Woods agreements and the current financial system, and we have to create it. But
Exactly. We are co-creating it with our partners.
Well,
Mark Prasangi at Carbon Shot Earth, and Jenny Carrington in her networks of people who are looking at the regenerative finance. Actually, later today, there is a meeting at OCAD University. It is a REFI meetup, regenerative finance. They're actually having a meeting at York University with Joe Brewer, who came in on Monday. I'll be meeting again, and he's the one working with Brian Pupa here in Markham to develop this center with York University and the city of Markham to start changing that paradigm of our thoughts around how do we develop so that we are not destroying our planet and we can actually live regenerative lifestyles. This is the largest program and project of anybody's lifetime, and we're in the middle of it right now. This team of dedicated people.
Can anybody come into that discussion?
I think so. I actually am hoping to get down there. It's about almost approaching 2 o'clock. And I didn't look up the details of what room they're in. I know it's at OCAD University.
I was asking if it's going to be Zoomed.
Oh, I don't know. I said I was just told about it when I went to the meeting on Monday. I was told there's a meeting at OCAD University. I think it's an in-person meeting to discuss regenerative financing, but I didn't get the details. It was just something that was talked about. I am registered for an event tomorrow at Cornell Community Center, and I know he's doing another discussion tonight at 9:30 p.m. They do have a virtual meetup to talk about the Rouge National Urban Park and what to do there. Again, something we can actually do in our landscapes here, hopefully with Indigenous peoples. My thought is maybe the upper watersheds we can have Indigenous peoples develop solutions and communities, having people living in the upper watersheds, regenerative lifestyles, and then have us settlers do something in the lower watersheds. We need the Indigenous peoples to do things in the upper watersheds, so we make sure that there's actually clean water flowing into the lower watersheds. But that's just an initial concept. I haven't talked to Brian about that yet. I'm hoping to meet with Brian next week after all of this hyper stuff is passed this week. So Joe Brewer is really he's on a whirlwind tour. He'll be visiting a number of communities in the US after he visits here in Toronto. So he's got his center also in South America. I think he's in Colombia. So they're restoring an entire mountain watershed in South America, and so they're setting the example for us to restore eco regions, and he wants to create a global network of eco regions. So we are part of that conversation.
Excellent.
So thank you all for coming on. I think we're at 1:45 p.m. We've been on the call for quite a while. So I'm hoping there's going to be people still watching us on Facebook. We are streaming this live. We are also recording it. And again, I can have everybody, if we can connect on WhatsApp or whatever social media afterwards, I can get everybody the recording, at least a link to the recording if they want it for their own archives. But it is all archived essentially on the Ad Hoc International Advisory Board of Goodwill Ambassadors Facebook site. So AHIABGA-TV, which is what Andrew Williams Jr. is hosting for us, so we can have these weekly events. So I want to thank everybody, and I will hopefully see some of you next week. Thank you for coming out to the Indigenous Global Unity Summit for this February 2nd session.
All right. Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. And Fred, thank you for your presentation. That was excellent.
Right.
Yeah, I'm glad because I was a member of the Richmond Hill Naturalists for many years. I actually wrote their newsletter, and just it's a reminder that that's actually where the roots of a lot of my knowledge comes from, not from the schools, but from being a member of a naturalist group and writing their newsletter for a few years actually. And so a lot of the things you talk about today are things I was completely aware of because they've been issues since I was in my 20s. And even though I don't look that old, I am 50 years old. So
You're still a kid.
Spring chicken. Fred, it was excellent. Well done, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Hendrik.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.